Here we go. Well, hi everyone. I'm Maria Marlin. I'm the outreach specialist for the Washington Invasive Species Council. My supervisor, Stephanie Helms, who's the executive coordinator of the council, was hoping to be here this morning, but unfortunately she's not feeling well. So I do ask for your forgiveness and patience since I'm going to attempt to do her slides. Didn't have too much time to prepare, but hopefully it won't be too painful. So here we go. All right. The Washington Invasive Species Council was established by the state legislature in 2006, and we're really tasked with stopping and preventing invasive species of all types. And this is a pretty big job, right? But we have lots of help. So to do this, the council brings together all the state agencies that have a role to play in invasive species. But we also bring together tribal nations, federal and local agencies, universities, industry, conservation partners. And if you think about it, all of these different organizations have a slightly different mission. But what the council does is unites everyone, looks at the big picture, and fills in those individual gaps that cannot individually be filled in by each organization. So we kind of like to compare ourselves to a compass by providing this policy level direction that really all of our members can use related to their invasive species response and management. There are three staff on the council, and then we have, of course, all of our members. And the three staff are Stephanie Helms, like I said, the executive coordinator, myself, and then Jessica LaBelle is the invasive species program specialist. So at all scales, invasive species, it's a challenge because they spread from one jurisdiction to another, right? They don't respect any sort of boundaries whatsoever. So your neighbor's problem will probably become your problem with time. So if we really want to be effective at addressing these shared issues, we need to share information to begin with, and then we work together to address the problem. So this begs the question, how do we begin working across jurisdictions so that we can be aware of what is around our lands? Well, one way is data collection and data sharing, because this is a way to scan the horizon for near problems and then begin to prepare. So the general public and your tribal members can really help by being aware of invasive species and helping to report any sightings. So of course, I realize and respect that there are data sovereignty issues, and you may not feel comfortable reporting to the Washington Invasive Species Council if you're in Washington or your state Invasive Species Council, or the report feels more appropriate for a different outlet. And that is 100% fine because there's truly no wrong place to report. So we really just ask that if you see something, say something. Because some new species may be of national significance or state significance. You may want to report certain species to get assistance and funding from others. And there's many places you can start. So you can start with your Natural Resources Department, a Tribal University Extension Office, or Robert Compton at the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Northwest Regional Office. These are all great resources and great places to start. And on this slide are a few other different places you can report invasive species. So your state's Department of Agriculture is a good first step for plant and pest diseases. For aquatic invasive species, there's the United States Geological Survey. And for aquatic and terrestrial plants, there's the Early Detection and Distribution Mapping System, which thankfully has an abbreviation called EDMAPS. And this actually powers our reporting app. And we're going to take a look at that on the next slide. So here's an example from EDMAPS. And this is showing the distribution of tree of heaven. So tree of heaven, it's a noxious weed, and it's the host for the spotted lanternfly, which Laurel mentioned earlier. So by finding and removing tree of heaven, we may be able to prevent the spotted lanternfly from establishing if it's brought to our region, which thankfully it's not in Washington yet. So by looking at these data aggregation systems, we're able to scan the horizon and see what invasive species are in our general area and which ones are going to pose a threat to our jurisdiction. So location data is also important to analyze impacts of invasive species. and really helps us to build a case to leadership for funding and staff to address a problem. So without good location data and the size of the populations, it's really difficult to build a sustainable and a well-funded program. So going back to this tree of heaven example, we know that this noxious weed is spread like very widely in Washington, pretty much everywhere. So it grows on public lands, it grows on private lands, it grows on tribal lands. And this slide is showing the result of a habitat suitability study for the spotted lanternfly. And unfortunately, the suitable habitat coincides with areas where tree of heaven is known to grow. So in 2023, we completed the Washington State Spotted Lanternfly Action Plan, which received valuable contribution from tribes. And this plan highlights the impact that this pest is going to have on cultural resources. So it also talks about tree of heaven distribution. And since we know where tree of heaven is located in the state, we can be proactive instead of reactive by trying to remove and control tree of heaven before the spotted lanternfly arrives. So I'm going to talk now about a few different ways to report an invasive species sighting in Washington. And of course, I first wanted to acknowledge that your tribe may already have your own system for mapping and data aggregation. So you might hear this and think that it's going to be an inconvenience to report on our app and on our system. And that's okay. We just really want you to view the council as a resource and maybe start thinking about, can we help you in other ways? We're actually redoing our strategic plan for the years 2026 to 2030. And we're currently exploring ways to bridge some of these gaps in data aggregation and sharing. And so we're really looking for feedback. All right, so reporting invasive species in Washington. There's 3 different options shown on the slide here. If you are in the state and it's during normal business hours and you see what Thomas was talking about, like the mussel, if you see an invasive mussel, that's something that you are going to want to call into the Emergency Aquatic Invasive Species Hotline, which is hosted by the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. There's also a feral swine hotline. So in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, it's a collaborative effort through the Squeal on Pigs campaign. And if you see any pig outside of captivity, we ask that you report it immediately, and you can use the feral swine hotline for that. There's our mobile app, which I will be talking about soon. And we also have a website for reporting and many other resources as well. All right, so the council hosts an app called the WA Invasives app, and this is for reporting invasive species in Washington. It's free, and we all love free things, so that's definitely a bonus. It's easy to use. It's powered by EdMaps. So remember from a few slides ago, that's that system for reporting really any invasive species. And your report is going to go to improve the national map that shows all of those invasive species and the distributions, not only through your state, but throughout the entire nation. I'm going to talk you through how to make a report on the next slide, but before I do that, after you submit a report, what happens? So what happens is that there's an immediate notification that's generated to council staff, state, tribal, federal entities, local agencies, really anyone who has signed up to receive this alert is going to get an email stating that such and such was reported and all the information that was collected in the report. And the response is really going to depend on a couple different things. It's going to depend on the lead agency, the species, and the area of the report. So I have it was a 5-minute video that since I talk so much, I'm not going to play. Instead, I will show you where to find it, but I'm going to briefly talk you through how to make a report on our mobile app. So our mobile app actually doubles as a digital field guide. So what you do, you can scroll through, and even if you're not making a report, you can just read about our different priority invasive species. But if you find one, you tap it, and then in the upper right-hand corner, you just tap report a sighting. That's then going to bring you to a map. Now, this is important. You're going to want to place the pin where you saw the invasive species. It will automatically drop a pin as to where you are right now. So if you have to move it, please move it to where the invasive species was. And then you just tap sighting location is here. Next, it's going to ask you for a photo. Now, on our website and on our app, you absolutely are required to submit a photo before proceeding. There's no option to keep going if you don't have a photo, and that's only because we need a clear photo so that our experts can identify it. After you upload a photo, it's going to ask you for your information, for some comments. The comments doesn't necessarily have to be, a physical description of the invasive species, because in theory, that should be in your very clear photo that you upload, right? So the comments can maybe be, if someone were to go out and address that invasive species immediately, where exactly would they find it? So if you were on a trail and it was about half a mile in on the right, that's something that you would say in the comments. You would then review all the information and hit save. And if you remember one thing out of this entire presentation, it's just because you saved the report does not mean that you submitted it. You can actually get this far without service if you're in a remote area. But to actually submit your report, what you have to do is go back to your menu, the little menu icon in the upper left-hand corner, and you have to find your report queue. And in your report queue are all your unsubmitted reports. So you have to tap and then hit upload before they are actually sent to us. And you'll know you're successful because you will receive an email thanking you for your report, and you will also get a little pop-up on your phone. All right, so a couple examples of this in motion. So this doesn't usually happen, of course, but sometimes the Perce detector reports something of national or even international significance. And the best example is a 2019 report of Vespa mandarinia, which was the first verified report of the northern giant hornet in the United States as well as within Washington. And a Perce detector made the initial report to the Washington Invasive Species Council, and then we immediately elevated it to the Washington State Department of Agriculture. There was a rapid response, there was trapping and surveillance, and this news, as I'm sure you all remember, led to unprecedented national and international interest. But it really speaks to the importance of our Perce detectors and the importance of reporting. If the person had not reported this giant wasp that they found on our hornet that they found, outside their door one morning, the outcome would have been really, really different. And in case you haven't heard the outcome, late last year, after 4 years, the Washington State Department of Agriculture and the United States Department of Agriculture jointly officially declared the northern giant hornet as eradicated from Washington State and the United States. And the second example I want to talk about is the zebra mussel contaminated marrow mothballs, which this example highlights what happened in 2021, but it did happen last year again. But this is a great example of no wrong place to report, because when the council receives a report, we immediately elevate it to the appropriate agency, right? But in this case, the report was made directly to that agency. And for all aquatic invasive species in Washington, that agency is Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. So what happened is that someone notified that agency that there were invasive mussels on Samarima mothballs in the store. And the United States Geological Survey was notified at the same time that the state initiated a response. Sales and movement of the mothballs were instantly halted. The council's role here was highlighted because we took part in raising awareness of the event. So even though we didn't receive the report initially, we helped the regulatory agency educate people about why awareness is so important and why reporting is so important. So we worked with Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife on the news release and on the resulting education about the issue and the importance of all first detectors really being on the lookout for hitchhiking invasive species. And this awareness worked because, it was this incident in 2021 and all of the press and the education that came afterwards that led an employee in 2024 to immediately report when he saw these invasive mussels again on Marimo mothballs. And that's my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. Here's my contact information. I know it's a lot, so please just remember that the council is a resource for your needs and for your questions. However we can help you, we're happy to try. And we look forward to hearing from you.